This is really my story. Story of my life. We through the climb of the mountain.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
so welcome, my pleasure. Welcome back, and welcome to those that weren't here before. I'm very, very excited for this class for a number of reasons. So first of all, as I always begin, please help yourself to a bagel, cream cheese, butter, orange juice, water, coffee, tea, what have you. Feel free to get seconds in the middle. We also have a paper and pen if you want to help yourself with notes. We're not going to be using the booklet today. You could use the booklet if you'd like. We're not going to be using it in the class, so feel free to use the paper from there, or if you brought your own pad. One of the reasons why I'm very excited about this class is because we did this class saying that we're going to do a supplemental class to the course to address some of the unanswered questions. Because every class that we had, we said, due to the lack of time, we're not going to be able to properly address A, B, C, and D. That takes another class or perhaps another course. What happened by the end of the course is I didn't write down those questions that needed to be discussed, and I didn't necessarily remember exactly what the things that needed to be discussed were. I remember some of them. Some of them are much broader than just one class. So I emailed you guys. What?
May I lower the window a little bit?
Sure. I emailed you guys saying, are you interested in another class, and do you have any questions? So Evan was interested, but no one had questions besides for Laurence. And she said she doesn't remember the questions from the class, but the one question that she had was, what happens to the soul when we go to sleep? And I was like, you know what? Let's do a class on that. Instead of discussing a few questions, we'll do that. And I think if people are interested, this could become a series that if people have questions, they could send them in, and we'll do a class per question, really delving into the topic. And I don't know if this is a good time, if 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning is the best time, or is sometime during the week, in the evening.
This is perfect for me, so
It's a good time.
I guess until my business opens, but that doesn't matter.
So I guess we'll keep it for now at this time. And with that said, please email your questions. If you have questions that come up during the class, write it down for yourself to email it to me after the class. And we'll choose a topic or maybe a few, and we'll be able to go through each class having some sort of topic. This topic this week, as you mentioned, is about the soul when we sleep, according to Jewish tradition. We will be touching upon dreams, but dreams essentially is another class.
Oh, I want one of those.
So perhaps that'll be the next one, but dreams is another class, but we will be touching upon the concept of dreams. Just know that whatever I say is subjective because there's more to it about dreams. And then if we have more time, when we're done, we might be able to take some other questions. If you have some old questions, maybe we could address it. So here we go. The question was posed by little Moshe to his dad during the rabbi's sermon. Why do we gotta be so quiet when the rabbi's talking? And his dad turned to him and said, because everyone is sleeping. Right? And
Funny, not funny.
the great story is when the rabbi was in the middle of talking, and Yankel, right in front of the rabbi, fell asleep, like a cold slumber, and he's snoring.
I was gonna say.
And it's really disturbing. And finally, the rabbi turns to the cantor and says, "Could you wake that guy up?" And he says, "Rabbi, you put him to sleep. You wake him up." Okay, so
Can I say something?
sure.
When I was a teenager, we were sitting in nice seats in the high holidays, and my father fell asleep. I said, Mom, wake Dad up, people are looking. And my mother said, your father pays a lot of money for this show. He can sleep if he wants to.
He can sleep if he wants to. That's great. That is great. Welcome.
Hello. Hi.
You got a seat right here. Here you go.
Thank you.
You help yourself to a drink, to
Oh, thank you.
bagel.
Oh, I gotta sit down.
All the steps, huh?
I just had pacemaker.
Very-
Can I get you a cup of water?
No, I'll sit for a couple minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so let me just start off with asking, is there any specific questions that we want to know about sleep before we begin? Yes.
Well, no, not about sleep. It'll be one of the questions, okay?
Well,
In terms of, when we sleep and, of course, you go on. I'll ask after. I want you to talk, because you may
I want to
cover
engage the
this.
crowd. If we cover it, I want to be considered that I covered your question. Well, what's the
Well,
question?
I guess what it is that our soul, if you take the psychological reasoning of our dreams, because dreams, Freudian, if you go all the way back into that, it's really, they say, it's what has happened to us during the day, it's our mind, okay? And then, if you go into also that other spiritual part of your soul, of other people's souls, that they come to visit you in a dream, okay? And there was one real big one of actually where a guy, his friend kept going to him and saying, "You must see my wife, you must see my wife." And they were friends, but they lost touch. He finally said, "What's going on here? You got a dream a second time. You must see my wife." He calls the wife, and his friend died.
Wow.
So, these are the chilling things. So you sit and, so for me, it's like dreaming, I know the psychological part. I know it's my mind and my ego that's doing stuff. And then you think of the spiritual stuff of somebody else's soul.
So that's mainly a dream.
Right.
So we'll touch upon that, but again, that will be mainly another class.
Another class.
Is there any other questions about sleep that people want to know? Specific questions about sleep that come to mind?
Sleep like life is a cycle. And you have to complete each cycle in order for your life or your dreams to be smooth. If you have an interruption or if you have any kind of a medical problem, it will disturb your sleep, which in turn will disturb your life.
Thank you.
And
Interesting. Okay. Okay, so let me pose some questions for the start of this class. First of all, the question is, what happens to the soul when we sleep? The concept of death versus the concept of sleep from a scientific perspective are extremely different, simply because in the case of sleep, you wake up. In the case of death, it's considered an end. But in Jewish tradition, death is not an end. The soul is just simply leaving the body. Not only that, but not only is the soul leaving the body, the soul is destined to return to the body. Sounds similar to sleep, where we go to sleep for some time and then we wake up. So what is the similarity, or is there a similarity between the concept of death and the concept of sleep? With that said, the question would be, how alive are we when we sleep? How alive are we when we sleep? And then obviously there's a concept of dreams that need to be a little bit checked out. So let me begin with, this is a general question about sleep. I hope the fact that the screen is smaller but clearer is gonna help us.
It's a makeshift screen.
I hope you don't pull the tape off your wall with that.
So last night I did it a few times and it was good. We'll see what happens. So
Gotta get you a screen.
okay, so here we go. The question is a simple, interesting style question. Why did God make our bodies that we have to sleep? We all sleep probably a third of our lifetime. So he could have just cut down our lifetime by a third and have us just go on, day in, day out. Why did he make the concept of freshness, tiredness, ups and downs? Go for it.
To regenerate our bodies.
But why did he have to make that need? Couldn't he just create a body that doesn't need regeneration?
Is it also to help our minds and our soul?
What do you mean?
Meaning rest. Okay, rest is very important, and being quiet is very important. because that's how we really, I guess, get to God. That's how we stay healthy.
So this is great ideas, but I wanted to bring out. You have something to say?
Only because of our class and things we learned about the soul and that our body doesn't contain our whole soul, that I now am thinking in cartoon
Electricity.
of our little spark going back to get recharged and seeing what else is happening, and maybe what we're seeing in our dreams sort of reflects some of that. But now that we say that, how do we know? Like, is
So
there
that's-
something there? But like I said, it sort of felt like that.
And all
Like a Sunday
animals, or at
morning
least all
meeting.
mammals, sleep, so it's not unique to
That's
human
true.
beings.
That's definitely
Yeah.
true.
And even though they don't have as high a level of consciousness or sophistication as humans, they need it too. So
Right.
God made them.
Why
So let me-
God made
also.
them
But let me
need
so
this
let me
sleep.
explain my
Well,
question
I
a
was
little
gonna
more.
say, what, it's the way to connect to God, to me, because in meditation, it's in the quiet moments
Okay, that's great.
that I feel closer to God, because
That's what I'm
everything
saying.
else
Oh, it
is
makes
shut
the
out. And
world
I always
stop.
say, you just have to be quiet and silent to hear the
That's
answer
great.
from God.
So let me rephrase the question. We'll return to what you guys said. Is we're asking a purely religious question. I mean, everyone understands why we need to sleep, because we get tired. We need to get to sleep to recharge, right? Like BA mentioned. The question over here is a religious question, saying God could do whatever He wants. He could create our battery as long as He would like it to create it. So why did He create it for? Why did He create a battery that basically lasts 18 hours and then goes into low power mode, and then we have to recharge to start again? He could have created a battery that lasts for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years. Why did He create the cycle of sleep, a daily cycle of sleep? You know, it's interesting that our energy is almost identical to the hours of the day. It would seem that the movement of the sun and our energy should have no connection. It's so inborn and innate and normal and natural that we never even think about it. It's just so normal, you know? There was a mistake, the world was created, and meanwhile, in this mistake, human beings and animals, well, animals not necessarily, but definitely human beings, sleep with the same cycle as the sun, as the movement of the sun, which is extremely interesting. What?
Circadian
Yeah,
rhythm.
your circadian
Which,
rhythm.
by the way, my puppies totally linked to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them.
Mm-hmm. Right? We make the
Yeah.
blessing in the
One
morning.
links to the sun.
We make the
We just
blessing
go against
every morning. We make a blessing, thanking God for giving wisdom
Yes.
to the rooster, that it knows what time is what's the word? Dawn, sunrise, right? So we're asking over here a religious question, which is, if it was about productivity, if it was about bringing a message to the world, changing the world, doing things during sleep, we don't do any of those things, it would seem like. So it seems like a waste of time. Obviously, it's not a waste of time practically because we need to sleep. But why did He make the need to sleep? Why couldn't He create a battery that goes for longer, that goes for 60 years and then it's up? It seems like there's a bunch of hours that we're not doing anything. And obviously there's a number of answers, including some of them were touched over here, which I think are very deep. One thing that I'll mention, which is just a simple and beautiful idea, which the Rebbe speaks about, is the concept of renewal. In life, we need the concept of renewal. If days were just long, endless days, the concept of I'll sleep on it, or the concept of tomorrow will be a better day, or we'll make it up tomorrow. The concept of tomorrow is such a unique concept that it's a gift that God gave us, that there's a tomorrow, that the day becomes night, and sometimes in our life becomes dark, but then the sun rises the next day. It's a new day with new energy. And there's a beautiful story of the Rebbe was once talking to someone in a private audience, and it was a very heavy conversation about the Russian Jewry. And he was giving over a lot of information about the different Russian Hasidim that were doing underground work, that were killed or sent to Siberia. And it was a very, very heavy conversation. The Rebbe was crying. It was extremely emotional for the Rebbe. And it went on so long that it became daybreak and it became light outside. And at that point of the conversation, the Rebbe looked outside and the Rebbe was crying the whole night. It was a heavy night. The Rebbe looked outside, and with a big smile, he said, "Sanaya Tug. It's a new day. It's a new day. You know, a new day brings new opportunity. A new day means restart, refresh. Everything that happened yesterday, let's put that on the back burner. Today's a new day. A day which contains its own message, its own value, right? Often people will ask themselves, what did I do today? Where does that exist? You know, the concept of productivity, we are all very good at wasting time. And how do we make sure that we're productive? So, at least I'm very good at wasting time. So how do we make sure that we're productive? So there's something called time management, right? And time management is gonna be based on days and hours and weeks and months. And those concepts allow us to ask ourselves, what did I do today? We're giving an overview of, if I didn't do anything today, that means I wasn't productive. What was my day? What was the meaning of the day? So that's just to begin some value to the concept of sleep, and the time is ticking, so let's move on. So our question was, how much are we alive? How much is our soul in our body? How much is death overlap with sleep? How much does death overlap with sleep? And the question is going to be, let's analyze for a moment the working body while we're sleeping based on the level of, I don't really know so much science, but based on the little that I know and the lot that I know from Torah, what about our body is working and what about our body is not working when we are sleeping? Okay. So to start off, the Talmud says that sleep is a 60th of death. This is a phrase from the Talmud. Sleep is 1/60th of death.
Where did they get the measurement?
I don't know. That the rabbis have they know where they get their stuff from. But this is what our tradition is, that sleep is 1/60th of death. Interestingly enough, I don't know what this means. King David, never slept for a half hour straight. Every 29 minutes, he woke himself. Why? Why did he never sleep a half hour straight? Our sages say, in your sleep, every half a minute, you sleep another neshima. I don't know what that translates as, but you sleep another neshima, which means in a half hour, you sleep 60 neshimot. 60 times 1 equals, right, 60.
Right.
So if sleep is a 60th of death, David never wanted to experience death, so he never slept 60 neshimot, which is the course of a half hour. In Jewish law, the concept of sleeping for a half hour has value. Every morning when we wake up in the morning, we're obligated to wash our hands. Negovasser, it's called. We wash our hands. Why do we wash our hands? We wash our hands because our hands are impure. Why are they impure? Because we tasted death. When we sleep, we tasted death. Death is impure. We wash our hands to remove that impurity. The law about washing your hands when you go to sleep only applies to sleeping for a half hour. If you sleep for any less than a half hour, if you sleep for 29 minutes, you don't gotta wash your hands. So we see how this concept of sleeping for a half hour actually is a concept in Jewish law, which I think is incredible. You have this idea of sleeping is a taste of death, 1/60th of death. If you sleep for a half hour, you went through a serious cycle of sleep, whatever that means. You got to a certain depth of sleep, which is a full concept, the real connection to death. Yes.
500 years ago, they didn't have clocks. How did they know when it was a half hour?
So the Talmud talks.
I'm sorry.
The Talmud talks about they had other ways of telling the time, right? They had various ways of telling the time.
I think it's just the
Or a
sun.
Sundial.
sand thing.
Sands.
Well,
they had various ways of
I
telling
guess
the
the
time.
concept of time.
The Talmud talks about how King Solomon, or David, I'm not remembering, would wake up by midnight every single night, and he had a system of a certain wind that blows at midnight, and he had a bell that was placed in the way of that wind that it would ring every time that wind blew, which was exactly at midnight. I'm not again, I'm not an expert
So
in this
just
area,
one-
but that's a great question.
Well, I also heard you gotta wash death out of you. You know, when you get up, you wash. your
Also,
face.
you wash your face,
Yeah,
right? We
wash
rinse
death
before we make a
from your
blessing.
eyes.
We rinse our mouth. This is all a concept of cleansing ourselves from the near-death experience, which is called sleep, that we don't actually connect it to death. The concept of people passing away in their sleep is a common, not in terms of a regular situation, but in someone that's gonna pass away. It's more probable, like in the hospital, when they expect someone to pass, often it will happen in their sleep, because when they're asleep, their body goes on low power mode, right? Their body is not as active. They're kind of halfway there, and sometimes they end up doing the rest of the way. So what part of our bodies is working, what part is not working? So let's start off with the respiratory system. This is a picture that I found online, which I think is really cute.
Respiratory system.
That's not? What is that?
No, that's your digestive
So that's-
system.
That's the
GI
system.
So that's what I mean. I mean the digestive
Don't read
system.
through that. This is like lipids. It's not
We're talking to a doctor here.
That's what I meant. I meant the digestive system.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
What's
Okay.
respiratory system?
Oh, it should be
The
dead,
most,
very
the
good.
most interesting thing about sleep
Yeah.
is that even
I don't know,
even
that's what,
when
I was
children
asking
are
is what
first
part is working.
even when children are first toilet trained, that even in a deep sleep, people are able to hold their bladder even while they're sleeping, which requires discipline. It's
That's
very
so.
interesting.
Okay, let's
Pretty talented too.
let's try to keep the class moving because we're gonna run out of time.
Yeah.
Even though I love the energy, it's great. So what's the respiratory
So
system?
what part of the body is
Respiratory
working?
is the breathing.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the respiratory system would probably go into the next category. The digestive system is not only not working less, but apparently the digestive system is actually working more when we sleep.
Yes.
When we sleep, I don't know this from science, but we have this confirmed from science. In Hasidus, I'm told, in Kabbalah, I'm told that the digestive system is working better when we sleep. When we sleep, our body ends up processing the unprocessed foods and the unprocessed stuff that we digested during the day. So when we wake up, we're cleaner, we're fresher. Honestly, if you talk to a doctor, she'll probably tell you that if you make sure that your bowels are clean before you go to sleep, your sleep will be much more qualitative, because if not, your body will be busy digesting and won't have time to rest. If you finish the digestive system during the day, your body will be focused on other stuff, like resting versus digesting your food, which is why the Maimonides says that you should not eat 4 hours before you go to bed. That's in terms of the digestive system. The digestive system seems to work better, which would seem to say that not only is sleep not death, but it's actually more alive. Your digestive system is working even better. What part of us, I gave it away, what part of us does not work at all when we sleep? Will we get an answer to that? What part of our body is not working at all when we go to sleep? Generally speaking, I'm not talking about
Muscles. We all stopped eating for us before.
Not our mind.
Talking,
eyesight.
Eyesight.
Eyesight, very good. Okay, let's. Sorry that I'm trying to keep us focused, but we're not going to be able to. So the next part of our body that we're gonna look at, which Jay mentioned, is eyesight. Eyesight, I think, is the one part of our body that completely shuts down when we sleep. We are not seeing when we go to sleep. Our mind is seeing, but our eyes are completely not working. Then there is our brain, and perhaps most of our body follows this concept, our respiratory system, and other parts of our body, which are not dead, but they're not alive. They're kind of in the middle. They're on what we call low power mode. The digestive system is working better than usual. The eyes are not working at all. They're at 0. The brain kind of goes down to 50%. When we sleep, we dream, we think, You ever have that experience of waking up in the morning and having all these busy thoughts about getting up or not getting up, and then you wake up a half hour later and you have no idea what you were thinking about because your brain was working, but kind of in a low power mode. We could dream things that don't make sense, right? Totally out of the box. One of the funniest dreams that are in my memory from as a little kid was in my parents' preschool. We had these little toy animals, and I had a dream one night of me playing with those animals in the classroom, and then these little animals became full-size animals, and it was one of those nightmares that I still remember. In any case, so our brain is working, but on low power mode. So in summary, we got our digestive system, and thank you for that correction. Our digestive system, which is working better, sorry. Our eyesight is not working at all, and our brain is in the middle. It's halfway there. Okay, what is the connection between our eyes not working and our brain sub-working? Could someone maybe suggest something? What would be the connection, or is there a connection?
Turn inward. Or I guess that's
Your
the reason why.
subconscious.
That's interesting. We turn inward.
Turn inward. As opposed to looking out, thinking out.
Or your subconscious
So the concept is that
ego.
the concept of a brain is objectivity. The concept of a brain is the ultimate power of the human soul as much as we could experience it in a body, which is a soul is objective versus us being subjective. In the body, we have a brain which allows us to kind of escape ourselves, be beyond ourselves, to understand things outside ourselves. The ultimate part of our brain is our eyesight. Our eyesight, unlike hearing is the way we understand things, perception, the way we take it. Eyes is I'm seeing you. You are there and I'm seeing you for who you are. The truth of you becomes clear to me without me having any way of distorting it. Our brains are a medium. Our brains is something that we could see with our mind's eye and digest it in our brains and translate it according to ourselves. Within our brains, there's many different levels, as Kabbalah talks about, some of them closer to eyesight, some of them further from eyesight. So the concept is, being that during our sleep, our soul kind of leaves our body, our soul kind of is less with us, we're less in tune with ourselves. Therefore, eyesight is gone. Our brains are discounted, right? A little less.
A blind person,
Yes.
if you lose one ability, then you have to overcompensate with another. So when you are sleeping, although you don't see, you have the other senses that are so much more acute.
It's very interesting. Okay, that is very interesting. Interesting thought. Okay.
Well, my husband's visually handicapped.
Really?
So, and he hears better. And
Very
he
true.
would even watch movies.
Right.
It would be someone with a mask on. I'm like, what actor is that? And he'd be able to identify them because he listened to them.
That's
Because you listen. That's
If I'm
incredible.
interested, my hearing works better too. It's very
Oh,
strange.
wow.
Like if it's something, all of a sudden I'm like, how did I hear that so low? But I was really interested. So my brain changes my hearing too.
Okay, so
So if I don't hear you, I don't take it personally. But it
okay, so this is actually why it says that when we are in exile, we're compared to sleep. During the time of exile, during the time of Galut, when we're not in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, when we had a holy temple, it's as if the Jewish people are sleeping. Why? The answer is during the holy temple, we have two things that we kind of don't have today. One is to see visually the truth of godliness. 3 times a year, the Jewish people would go up to the holy temple and they would see God. They would see miracles. They would know that there's a God from the concept of sight. Their service to God during those 3 times a year was on a different level because of their realization of the truth of God. something that we absolutely don't have today. Similar to the concept of sleep, where we don't have the concept of sight. We don't see anything when we sleep. During exile, we don't see God at all. Another thing, a second thing, connected to the fact that we were able to see God, is that our ability to perceive God in our mind's eye, our ability to be able to understand about God in our brains was that much more real and true and concrete than it is today. Our ability to understand God today through studying, which is important, is in comparison to a dream, to the way we were able to understand God during the time of the Holy Temple. Just like a dream is kind of like a imagination. It's not the thing itself. You're imagining it. The same thing is true with our understanding of God today versus the understanding of God during the time of the Holy Temple. It wasn't an imagination. Today, it's considered an imagination. Our brains are that much more brain dead. We're that much less acute.
How do the rabbis know that, or how was that discovered, or who first?
This is
said
tradition.
that? That's just tradition.
This is tradition. Tradition is, you're right. The way I see tradition is not just tradition, meaning we were taught this by rabbis that had the right to know these stuff. But this is tradition. There's verses about it. In general, the concept of the descent of the generations, the concept of a descent. Our generation is considered the heel of exile versus the head. Right, the time of the Jews in the Midbar, in the desert, was the head of the Jewish people. They were much more understanding. Their service was much more about here than action. And today, our main service is about doing. We got to do it. Action. We're doers. Of course, we are encouraged to think and to understand and to discover. But our main ability, our uniqueness, which stands out over previous generations, is our action. That's for another time, for another class, or for another course. What?
People don't use their brain enough before they take action.
This is also true. So with that said, this is why when we sleep, we do, or we're encouraged to sleep flat. Our head and our feet aligned. During the day, there's a hierarchy. Our brain is higher than our feet. When we sleep, in terms of the presence of our soul in our body, it isn't more present in our brain than it is in our feet, like the rest of the day. On the contrary, our digestive system is working better. Our brain is on low power mode. We're kind of flat. Our brain and our feet are equal. There's only the concept of the action-oriented part of the soul, which is in the body, low power mode. The heavy parts of our soul, real emotions, concrete emotions, real intellect, concrete intellect, are not there. They took our leave for a couple hours, which we'll get to a little bit more right now, which is why if you sleep standing, it's not as good quality. Or if you sleep sitting, because you're not allowing that equalization. You are giving hierarchy, which doesn't allow your body to have a proper rest. Rest means no hierarchy. We're letting go. Let us move on to the next part because the time is ticking ever faster. Okay, our soul, on the other hand. So far we discussed our body. We didn't really discuss our soul. Some of the things in this class are going to be revisiting things in the previous classes. So forgive me if you weren't there. I'm going to go into them a little bit, but not as much as we did in previous classes. In previous classes, we mentioned the concept of 3 parts of our soul, although there's 5 parts of our soul. We mentioned nefesh, ruach, neshama, which is soul, spirit, and soul. But I don't know in any case. So nefesh is the action-oriented part of our soul. Ruach is the emotional part of our soul. And neshama is the intellectual part of our soul. And we discovered that when we die, nefesh remains down here and connects ourselves to our body at all times and connects ourselves to the physical world. Nefesh is our connection to physicality. Our ruach and neshama, our emotional and intellectual parts of our soul, leave our body and go to paradise, go on high. This is things that we discovered in previous classes. Again, I'm not going into it at length at the moment. This gives a little bit clarity on what we just spoke about, how the body is kind of dead. When we're sleeping, the body is, sorry, I didn't finish my sentence. The same is true in sleep. When we sleep, our soul, our nefesh, remains in our body, our action-oriented part of our soul. But to a large extent, our ruach and neshama, our emotional, intellectual parts of our soul, and definitely the higher parts, leave the body. Where do they go?
Oh yeah, where do they go?
So let us now read a text, which you have over here on the screen. I'll read it for you, and the text reads as follows. This is taken from the Talmud. Rabbi Bizni, Rabbi Acha, and Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Rabbi Meir, which we've spoken about in a previous class. They say as follows. The neshama, meaning the soul, fills the entire body. And when a person sleeps, it ascends upwards and draws life for him from above. It ascends upwards and draws life for him from above. We are taught that when a person sleeps, the soul revisits the experiences that it had in this world without the body that they contained. Every single experience that we have in this world, an external experience, an emotional experience, perhaps even a thought, every thought that we experience during the day is a spiritual power, a spiritual energy, which has a body. That spiritual energy has an experience to it, which is the thought that we're having during the day, which is why us in our bodies could experience that thought, or that speech, or that emotion.
Say it again, please.
Sure. Every experience that we have during the day is a spiritual experience. Every thought that we have is a spiritual energy that we create when we have that thought. When we experience it within the lens of a body. The body is the thought that we're thinking. The body is the words to the thought. The limitation that allows us to experience it within a physical body. The reason why we experience our thoughts when we're in our body is because the thought has its own body with which we take the thought. We relate to the thought. We perceive the thought. But if the soul were to leave the body and experience that spiritual energy, that thought, without its body, that experience might be very different. Perhaps that spiritual energy could take on other bodies that it will experience itself into. Which I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's a little bit the concept of dreams. What does it mean that we dream about what we had during the day, but yet the dream is so different than the day experience? The answer is the spiritual energy left its physical presence and took on a different physical presence. So it's similar, yet not the same. It's that energy that's replaying itself to you. It's an energy that you put out into the world, you put out into existence by thinking about it, which continues to exist and will exist forever. And it will come back to you, to haunt you or to help you in various different forms, which we experience during our dreams. This is a touch on the concept of dreams, which we will not get too much into during this class. Okay. With that said, our soul, we are taught, enters the various chambers that we visit during the day. This is very interesting. And again, this is kind of like another class, but I'm going to touch on this. On high in heaven, there's the concept of chambers. Obviously not physical chambers, spiritual chambers, or spiritual presences, spiritual experiences. There's a chamber called the Chamber of Music, or there's a chamber called the Chamber of Art, or the Chamber of Ideas, or the Chamber of Emotions, or the chamber, and I'm sure that all these chambers have many, many sub-chambers. And when our body goes to sleep, our soul visits the chambers that we visit during the day. So if we enter the world of music during the day, our body visits the world of music at night. Our soul visits the music at night. But you can imagine that the experience of the soul for music without a body is so much more greater than our experience of music during the day. Which is why sometimes you'll have an idea and then you'll sleep on it and you wake up the next morning and it's so much clearer to you. Because your soul experienced that idea at night without the limitations of the body and without the limitations of the body of the thing that it was experiencing. Imagine experiencing music without having to limit it to chords. Imagine experiencing the pure beauty of music without any body to it. That's what the soul experiences at night. Our soul enters the chambers that we experience during the day. There's a very interesting story, which is about 200 years ago, in the time of the first Chabad Rebbe. So that's when the Haskalah movement started. The Haskalah movement is the father of the Reform movement, or the mother of the Reform movement, I'm not sure. Haskalah, Haskalah, Haskalah. Haskalah literally means intellectuals or philosophy. And it was started by a person by the name of Moses Mendelssohn. And Moses Mendelssohn was a outside of the box thinker. He was a German educated man, and he felt that the Jewish people have to be educated in worldly concepts. And they introduced the concept of regular Jewish kids that grew up in the shtetl to travel to France and to go to Sorbonne or other universities and become academics. And ultimately their goal was to draw Jews away from Judaism. That was their ultimate goal. But they didn't really necessarily give off that message. And many of them, which weren't religious, would live a religious lifestyle on the outside, even though they didn't really care about religion. And they would become teachers for children. And they would focus a lot on academia. They would teach Torah, which, because you couldn't teach anything else in the shtetl. You weren't allowed to teach math and science, you taught Torah. But they would focus on the academia of it. And they would eventually, convince the children that they want to become academics. And they would send them off to universities against the will of their parents. And then these children would come back completely not part of the fold. And they let many, many Jews off from Judaism.
Sounds like Colombia now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bad stuff happening in academia.
Sure,
Yeah.
yes. So this was a very difficult situation for the religious Jews at the time, for the Jewish nation. And it was a serious problem. Chabad almost didn't suffer from this at all. Why? How are we not subject to this issue? And the answer was because their main focus, their main hook within the Jewish circle was they focused on diktuk, they focused on grammar, which is a very academic thing to focus on. So they would come in and they would read the Bible, they would teach Bible, but they would give extreme focus on the grammar of the Bible. And they would talk about the pronouns and I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm just the grammar of how things are written and what comes before what and the language, and then that would create children that are very academic, and they would want to move on to other ideas. Chabad had a rule: we don't do grammar. We don't teach grammar to our children, which was extremely interesting. But it was a safeguard. It didn't allow these people into our circles. If someone came and was teaching children and they were teaching grammar, we said, you're out, you're fired, because we don't teach grammar to our children. This was a safeguard. So someone came to the Alter Rebbe, to the first Chabad Rebbe.
What year was
This is 250 years ago. I'm not going to know the English year off my head.
Did they just not teach grammar with regard to Torah and Talmud? Did they teach grammar in speech and learning Yiddish or whatever language they spoke?
They didn't teach grammar, so you could have picked up grammar.
Okay.
But they didn't teach grammar in the schools. They didn't focus on grammar at all. So someone came to the Alter Rebbe, and he was dressed up like a Hasidic Jew, but really he wasn't. But he claimed himself to be a Hasidic Jew, and he told Alter Rebbe, why don't you teach grammar? The Alter Rebbe himself was an expert in grammar, and he said, you should be teaching grammar to your children. And his point was to get the Alter Rebbe to allow grammar in the schools, and then they would be able to have a hook. And the Alter Rebbe, with without blowing his cover, told him the following message. He said, when you go to sleep, your soul visits the chambers that it visited during the day. And if you learn grammar, your soul visits the grammar chamber. Said the Alter Rebbe, and I'm not going to explain this, I'm just saying the story because it's interesting for our topic. The chamber of grammar is very close to the chamber of heresy. They're neighbors. Said the Alter Rebbe, sometimes the soul goes to the chamber of grammar and loses its way and ends up walking into the chamber of heresy. And when it comes back down in this world, the person wakes up with doubts in his brain. He wakes up a heretic. That's why we don't teach grammar, because we don't want our soul to visit the chamber of heresy. I'm not going into the details of that story. I don't know the explanation for that story. I'm just saying it because it's interesting for the sake of our lecture. And again, the clock is ticking, so we're going to move on. I want to say one more interesting story before we move on, which is so cute to me, and I'm so happy I found it. I'm happy that you asked me this question just for me to find this story, which is there was a chassid, right, a Hasidic Jew, from very recently. Like I know some of his children, right? So he's a very recent Jew. Maybe he passed 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, and his name was Shaul Brook. Shaul Brook. He originally was in Russia, and then he moved to Israel, and he lived in Tel Aviv. This Jew was a regular guy. He wasn't a holy guy, regular guy like me and you, but he was an extreme astute Torah scholar. He sat and studied Torah. He taught children, and he was a really special guy. He worked on himself. He was a very, emotionally in tune and spiritual type of guy. And he had a custom that whenever he would wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, which he wouldn't go back to sleep before opening up a book on a shelf and studying some Torah. He would get up in the middle of the night, could be 2 o'clock in the morning, he'd go to the bathroom, he wouldn't go back to bed. He would go to the table, he would take out a Talmud, he would take out a code of Jewish law, he would study something for maybe a half hour.
But he would wash his hands first.
He would wash his hands. In Hasidic circles, we don't wash our hands before we get out of bed. So I have a water basin.
You do wash your hands.
We don't get out of bed before washing our hands. That's what I
Yes,
meant to say.
You wash it
So we have a water basin
water's
next
right
to
by
our
the
bed, and we'll wash our hands even before getting out of bed. So we don't walk 4 feet before getting out of bed. Or 6 feet. So he would wash his hands. He would go use the bathroom. He would probably wash it again after using the bathroom, and then he would learn something, and then he would go to sleep. And his kids said, "Papa, we know that you love learning, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a time for everything. You're in the middle of your sleep. Why would you do that to yourself? You know, you're a walking zombie. You just went to the bathroom. Get back to sleep. It's gonna take you longer to fall asleep now. Why would you do that?" And he said the following thing, which I'm not saying this that you should do it. I'm just saying this because I think it's so cute and so great for our lecture, which is he said, when I go to sleep, my soul leaves my body. I imagine, I hope, that it's studying Torah up there. I study Torah during the day. It's probably hanging out with the angels and studying the depths of the Torah and the deeper meanings of the stuff that I've studied during the day. And suddenly, in the middle of all this glory, in the middle of the class, the soul says, "Excuse me, stop, please pause your class, because I gotta leave." And it heads back down, gets into the body, and uses that bathroom. And now it's on its way back up. It comes up, and the angels say, "Hey, yo, what did you dash out for? What was that all about? Why the break? Why did you leave for 5 minutes?" He says, am I gonna really allow myself to experience the shame of saying I left because I had to use the bathroom?
So he could say
Right, so he
went
would
to
study Torah.
So he said, whenever I come
Yeah.
down to use the bathroom, I open up a Talmud. So I could share something when I come back. Hey guys, you know why I left? I have something to share with you. Something to add to the conversation. So I thought that was a great story. Let's move right along.
I thought maybe because that was the last place he went, he'd go use the restroom or something up there, I don't know. But it was basically it
Yeah.
wasn't to cleanse himself, it was something spiritual after.
hmm Okay, so let's make a recap of what we spoke about. We spoke about the body. the body being asleep, being under energized, our digestive system being stronger, but our general presence of our soul is weaker. Yet at the flip side, we spoke about our soul going on high, experiencing more life than usual, generating life and drawing life for the next day, which would seem like a contradiction. Is sleep under-energized or is sleep over-energized? Is sleep more life or is sleep less life? Is sleep more soul or is sleep less soul? Any ideas? And that's why we have a question mark on the screen.
When you sleep, you experience things that you might have been worried about or something that you have gone through. And generally what you see archetypes of people and situation that represent all that has happened to you, and your mind will process that. And if your mind is clear, then you wake up maybe remembering or maybe not remembering. If you have a problem like my husband had, he had Parkinson's, and he had a sleep problem, some of the things that he dreamed and some of the realms that he visited, animal sounds and different languages and all that, you wonder where that all comes from and what realm he was in at the time that he was
That's great.
sleeping.
That's great.
And that was far from the norm. So at that stage, when you have a disease or something, it only precipitates the disease. But if you are sleeping a normal sleep, it just helps you process your dreams, and maybe it makes sense or clears your mind. I found the best way of studying was late at night. So when I went to sleep, well, I would
You allow it to sink in.
process, yes, and I processed
Mhm,
it.
sure.
No, I don't know if I'm getting off the track.
We went to that chamber of what you were learning, and you did further
Correct.
learning.
Correct.
Right.
So
right.
here-
I helped
But
you
can
learn.
I say something?
Yeah,
Maybe
please.
it's not
Is
just
how do I help
any
you learn?
illness.
Yes.
This
Stay away.
was a nervous system brain illness, and maybe a nervous system brain illness is what allows our essence, our soul, to be liberated and to go to other realms.
Interesting. Let's leave it
That's
for
the
now
concept of
because
liberation.
we're going off topic.
That he was in touch, it's from what I heard you say, he was in touch with things that we in the 3D body here during the day
Right,
are not.
generally, unless we are inhibited. But he was
And
free.
maybe what we see as inhibition, as mental illness, as neurodegenerative,
Yes, neurodegenerative.
actually is our soul touching on what's true that we can't see here.
Right. Okay, so we're going a little off topic. Let's try
Yeah,
let's try to get back to the conversation, especially because I'm only at 4 out of 8 slides and we're an hour into an hour and a half class. So
We're just gonna move in here.
we're gonna move in here, right? So
And then you could keep talking.
So back to the contradiction. The contradiction is, are we more alive when we sleep or are we less alive when we sleep? And going back to your point, as well as Lawrence's point, which is what we spoke about earlier, is our subconscious is more alive, our conscious is less alive. And not only is it not a contradiction, but it's actually interconnected, they're interrelated, they're one and the same. Because if we are fully present, our subconscious is not as there. We are not as much there with our subconscious. When we are not present here, it allows us to be present with the subconscious. Think about death. Is death life or the opposite of life. Based on our class, death is more life than life, because death is the soul experiencing pure soul, versus life in this world is a limitation on the soul. So it actually is one and the same. It's allowing the soul to revisit its souliness, its purity, its out of the body experience, and therefore the body is less alive. They're not opposites. It's actually one and the same concept. Like we mentioned, the soul, the sleep is a rejuvenation. Why is sleep a rejuvenation? Not only because the body is resting, more importantly, because the soul is rejuvenating. The soul gets tired during the day. Not our body. It's not our body doesn't have life. Our soul has life. So our soul gets tired. Now the question is, a soul gets tired? How could a soul get tired? A soul is life. The answer is because the soul limited itself into a body. When it limits itself into the body, it's not so solely. It becomes limited, and therefore its energy is limited. Imagine taking an electricity current and putting it into a battery. You know that battery is going to run out. Why? Because the battery is limited. Doesn't mean electricity is limited, but the battery is limited. If the battery is limited, there's only so much electricity in it. So you got to reconnect the battery to electricity.
Rabbi,
Yes.
do dogs, cats, cows, do they have souls?
Yeah. We spoke about that in previous classes.
Okay.
Sure.
So they sleep for the same reason.
Our connection, yes. This is connected to everything, all animals, everything. They all are connected to this concept.
Okay.
This is not just a human conversation, even though the next picture is of a human. The reason why I put up this picture is because I asked ChatGPT to give me a picture of someone enjoying their sleep. And the reason why I wanted that is because, which I think that they did a great job, is because Hasidic teachers tell us that the reason why we enjoy sleeping is for this reason. We enjoy sleeping because our soul enjoys experiencing godliness when we sleep. It's the weirdest thing that we like sleeping. We don't actually do anything when we sleep, but we love sleeping. Doesn't taste good.
Yeah.
It's not a nice experience. It's a sweet experience that we're totally not aware of the sweetness. Where is the sweetness in sleep? But everyone knows that it's so sweet. That was a sweet sleep. You know what? You know who's talking when you say that was a sweet sleep? Your subconscious. Your conscious knows subconsciously that was sweet. Why? Where? How? When? I got no idea. But it was sweet. You know where it was sweet? It was sweet on high. It was sweet when our soul was experiencing godliness. Isn't that beautiful?
It's such a contradiction though to our needs during the day because
To what?
it's a large contradiction to our needs during the day where we need control.
So we'll talk about
we don't
that.
want to be, we want to be strong
I
and
love
not
that.
vulnerable.
I love
and
that.
yet we enjoy something that puts us into a vulnerable position where we have no control.
See, my daughter wants to sleep, can sleep 18 hours a day. She's checked to see if she's narcoleptic, and she's just like, I can sleep, I don't. Well, she doesn't feel rested. But, I mean, she just craves sleep, and I think she's under a lot of stress during the day, and
There you go.
so
So-
her soul needs to rest.
Sure.
I'm gonna tell my husband.
Okay, let's move right along. So this is very interesting. The next slide is, I think, probably the most interesting part of this class to me, which is another reason why I thank you for asking this question, because I wouldn't have known this before. I quoted this quote before, which is 1/60th of death. Sleep is 1/60th of death. We explained it to be referring to our body, that our body is experiencing 1/60th of death. The commentaries on the Talmud teach us that another explanation, or the same, one and the same, of the concept of sleep being 1/60th of death is we experience during our sleep 1/60th of the experience of afterlife. we've spoken about in previous classes that when our soul leaves our body, it experiences punishment, or more accurately, it experiences cleansing, and it experiences reward. We experience cleansing for the things that we did wrong, and we experience reward or goodness or sweetness of the things that we did right. We spoke how those two things, punishment and reward, are not a consequence. Sorry, they're not a, what was the word we used? They're not a
Punishment?
a give back, like the way you work and you make money.
Sound effect.
But it's not right. But it's an automatic outcome, like the way you would sow and have wheat, because the punishment or the cleansing experience is the experience of the things you did wrong in a truer sense. You're experiencing the truth of the wrong deed that you did. And that hurts. What?
Karma.
This is like this.
A reaction to an action.
Exactly.
This is the action, this is
Exactly.
the consequence.
The reward
Or
equally is not a piece of candy for doing something right, but it's experiencing the goodness of the mitzvah that you did. Experiencing the goodness of the goodness that you did. So the cause, the punishment and reward is our actions that we did during the day. Now, that's a concept that we spoke about at length in one of our classes. I'm not going back there. I'm just mentioning it. But the reason why I'm mentioning it is because that is a 60th of that is what we experience every single night when we go to sleep. When we go to sleep, our soul experiences a 60th of death, which means that it revisits what we did during the day, but in a spiritual sense, which for the soul is a cleansing process as well as a rewarding process. A
What about
sweet
mitzvot?
process. That's exactly it.
Depending on the amount of mitzvot.
So whatever mitzvahs you did during the day, which every day we are full of mitzvot, I guarantee you on that, we experience at least a partial reward, a partial sweetness of that experience during the day. Isn't that incredibly interesting? What?
During the night.
During the night. Thank you. So I thought that was an incredibly interesting concept, and let's move right along. I think we're getting the idea of what sleep is about over here. Yes, we're answering your question,
Oh, yeah.
both from the soul's perspective as well as from the body's perspective. Okay, let's visit the concept of dreams for a little bit. Ches Lamed Mem. Those are the three letters on the board. Ches Lamed Mem. Anyone recognize that word? That word spells the word Chalom. Anyone know what the word Chalom means?
Dream.
Very good. Dream. Now, could you translate another word for me? Chalim.
Chalim.
Do you know what that means?
What?
Chalim. No, it's more of an ancient Hebrew word, not as modern.
Oh.
Chalim means strength.
Oh.
They're the same letters, two different words. Chalom means dream. Chalim means strength. In Jewish tradition, the Hebrew language is not like any other language, which is just the heck of using words to express ideas. But the words actually carry the meaning of what they're saying. Kind of like the way people talk about Yiddish, sounding like the word that it says. Like a drei cup sounds like a drei cup. Chalim and Chalom, dream and strength, are expressed in the three-letter word Ches Lamed Mem. And the interesting thing is, why in the world would the same three letters express such different ideas? A dream, as we spoke about, is a low power mode of our brain, which would seem to be the opposite of strength. On the one hand, we have a dream, which is this picture up here, which is low power mode. The body is experiencing less brain work, right? That's what we said, how a
But it-
dream
yeah, it's-
is an imagination. We could think about stuff that don't make any sense,
Right.
where brain is not as strong and critical. Yes,
You're saying a dream is a low power mode because our brain is on low power, right?
and that's where a dream comes from. A
But
dream
our
is,
soul is on high power.
Right.
right, but that's not a dream. A dream,
But maybe the dream is the soul. having an experience.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about the dream itself. What's the dream itself? The dream itself
Yeah.
is what is the meaning of this dream? Like, why am I thinking about stuff that just don't make any sense? Why am I imagining something that's crazy? And the answer is because the brain, this is the answer that we gave until now. The brain is not as strong. So we're able to, just like, go into a mental asylum and you'll see people that think in the terms that we think during the night.
Yeah, I've been seeing this whole thing differently than you have been, I guess. Like,
Okay, let me get to the end of this and then we'll revisit your idea. So on the one hand, a dream seems to be low power mode, which is our brain is less working, which is the meaning of a dream according to Jewish tradition. A dream is our brain, that's what we said, that a dream, that during exile we're dreaming because our perception of God is not as critical and not as real as it was during the time of the Holy Temple. Our perception of God is considered an imagination compared to the real perception of God during the time of the Holy Temple, because a dream is low power mode. On the other hand, chalim means strength. So this seems to not make any sense. Why would the same word experience two opposite things? And we're running out of time, but we're almost done, I think. And the answer is as follows. So first of all, one simple answer is, I think what you were touching on, and maybe you were saying deeper than this. What? A simple answer is that although a dream is weakness, but it brings strength. The fact that we're on low power mode allows us to recharge. Unlike a phone being in low power mode, which is when you're not charging, when our body is on low power mode, that means we're charging.
It gives us strength.
So it gives us strength. And that's why a dream could be called the same word as strength, because it's connected to strength in the sense that although it's not strength, it gives us strength. That's an answer, but it doesn't really do me good, because I feel like we need a better answer than that. Because at the end of the day, a dream is not strength. And here comes an answer which is a little Kabbalistic, but I think it's a nice answer, something that I discovered also because of the fact that you asked me to give this class. Like the Pirkei Avot say, you learn more from your students than from your teachers. And the answer is as follows. This answer, again, I'm going to say is subjective. Like I mentioned, dreams are a complicated concept, and we'll talk about that in another class. But certain dreams are this concept, which is as follows. We've mentioned earlier in this class that our thoughts create energies. Let me talk about that for a moment. Our soul is an energy. Energy doesn't die. However, energies take on a body to exist within. Our thoughts are not the same energy as our soul. Before we thought those thoughts, that energy didn't exist. We created that energy by thinking about it. Now this energy exists. That energy will exist forever. Just like our soul will exist forever, our soul can never die. The thoughts that we think create an energy which exists forever because energy doesn't die. Our thoughts will never die. Where do they go? I don't know. I don't care. They don't have to go anywhere necessarily. They just are. However, now that they are, they definitely could revisit us.
And others.
And they could visit others. And they could revisit us as separate beings. Meaning, when we experience our thoughts, we feel like we're in control. But now that the thoughts exist, they exist as an independent being. And they could come and revisit us and do other stuff. And they could revisit us, like I mentioned before, like I spoke about dreams, in other settings, in other bodies.
That's right.
When we talk about the concept of demons, according to Jewish tradition, the soul of a demon is created by our thoughts. The energy of a demon is our thoughts.
And I know.
And that energy creates its own entity, which becomes a demon, which could disturb us and haunt us. And thank God we don't experience demons today. But, which is another story and another concept to talk about. Maybe that's another class, the concept of demons. Do we believe in demons? That's another class.
The thought is
And you'll ask that in your email if you're interested in knowing about demons.
so here is your answer of why I thought differently on this.
Okay, one second. I'm gonna get
That's
back
the
to you. I'm gonna back to you. I want to hear you talk about it, but I'm gonna get back to you in a second.
What are you saying?
I'll finish and then you'll tell me if I said what you wanted to say. So, okay, with that said, when our soul goes on high at night to revisit what it did during the day, it's heading up there. It's heading up the ladder, right? It's flying up, like a bird flying upwards, heading to the chamber that it is going for. It's heading to its goal. And then you'll have a situation. Let's talk about a tzaddik for a moment, the person that doesn't do anything wrong. They don't do bad things during the day. So they don't have bad experiences at night. They won't have bad dreams. They won't have a cleansing experience during the night necessarily. However, what they do during the day is regular stuff that are not holy, like eating and talking about needs, right? Like regular needs that are mundane, that are physical, not holy. Those thoughts, those mundane thoughts, those physical thoughts that they had during the day don't go away at night. They actually become baggage on the soul, not allowing the soul to go to where it wants to go. The soul is heading to God, to talk about the Torah, to talk about godliness. And suddenly, he got the ketchup that he ate that day standing in the way. I mean, hey, I'm here. What are you going to God for? The ketchup is here. And that's stopping him from experiencing the ultimate experience of rejuvenation that he experiences at night. God gave us the gift of dreams. A dream is, I'm rechanneling that ketchup energy into another existence for the time being, namely the dream, which is going to allow me to unbaggage those things that we're carrying, to now allow the soul, now that it's rid of those mundane thoughts because they're busy giving you dreams, now the soul could do its thing. Which is why a dream is the word chalom, and chalom means strength, because as much as a dream is low power mode, it's also the experience of certain things which are hindering our soul from experiencing pure soulness. Now those non-pure soulness things are rechanneled into a dream. Our soul is now free to fly to its destination.
I'm envisioning Peter Pan, my cartoon mind is still here.
Is that what you wanted to say? Or something like that?
It's something like that. But yeah, that the thoughts are just thoughts. They're not who we are.
Right. Okay, but
I'll disagree on that, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
I
I will
disagree.
disagree on that.
I disagree, Joe.
okay, let's
Okay.
move. We'll talk.
Next
They're
topic.
not, and
So,
that's one of my lessons I'm going to ask you for.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll do another class on thoughts, which is a great idea.
Who's
And what's thoughts
That is a
in
great idea.
in Judaism? That's a great idea. Write that down if you want that class. And let us move
'cause
on
then we
to
can
the
have
last
fun.
segment. I'm up to slide 8 of 8,
Our
and we
thoughts.
have 7 minutes. So let's see if we can get through this next part in 7 minutes, because I think this is the most powerful part, and I hope I say it clearly. Which is as follows, and I apologize if that picture is not appealing. Why do I have a heart on the screen?
Is it for me?
I think it's supposed to be a heart.
It is a hard
I created this visual
You did? On
Yeah.
ChatGPT?
on Sora. Sora is a ChatGPT platform,
Oh, I don't know.
and
Wow.
it created. I asked it for a beating heart, and it gave me this. So it shows you how
Moving
helpful it is. It gave me a moving heart, not a beating heart. But in any case,
Very cool.
Sora? Wow, that's interesting.
I feel like there is a visual of like a beating heart, right? Even though I don't know if that
Yeah.
actually happens, but there's a visual of a beating heart. So that's what I meant for, but I don't have that on the board. But why do I have a heartbeat on the board?
Because it's very important. Your heart is very important.
Because that heart's important.
It
But
is
here
really
we're
weird.
not giving a heart class. That'll be a different class. We're
Right, it will
giving
be. That's
will-
the other one.
we're giving a sleep class.
So why
The
is
answer
the
is as
heartbeat
follows.
important to sleep?
The answer is as follows. And bear with me for a moment. Let's go away from sleeping for a second. We'll come back to it. Someone mentioned the life cycle. Did you mention the life cycle? Cycle of life?
Yes.
Is that you?
Circadian.
Circadian
Okay,
rhythm.
let me take a deep breath because I've been speaking for a while. Here we go.
Inhale, exhale.
Life is a cycle. Life cycle.
Life cycle, right?
Breathing is a life cycle. We breathe in and we breathe out. Our heartbeat is a life cycle. Our heart beats and beats, keeping us alive.
It contracts.
It contracts
Relax.
and then it relaxes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
In Hebrew, the Kabbalah word for this is Ratzai V'Shuv. Leaving and returning. Leaving and returning. Life is a cycle of leaving and returning. Life is a cycle of a heartbeat. Life is like a heartbeat. A heart represents the essence of life. The beating of the heart represents the essence of life. A conversation with someone is an experience of leaving and returning. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is as follows. When we talk to somebody else, there is a balance between being present in the conversation and yet listening to them, putting them in the conversation. Is it you or is it them? We don't even realize it, that what our soul, what our personality is doing in the conversation, hopefully a good conversationalist, is very busy running back and forth between themselves and the other person. They're leaving themselves. It's about you, I'm listening, and then I'm readily returning, I'm present. It's not, they're both happening simultaneously, but there has to be this constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in your conversation, because a conversation is a merging of opposites. The soul being in a body is a merging of opposites, which is why we have a heartbeat. We can't just be in the body and live. Blood just flows through our body. We have to have a heartbeat, a rhythm, retracting and relaxing, leaving and returning, because life and body are opposites. For life to be physical, for life to be in a body, life has to constantly remember that it's not physical. If our soul would come to our body and be like, you know what, this is my space. I'm a body person. We wouldn't last very long, because a soul, life, and a physical flesh, meat, a piece of meat, are opposites. The only way that a piece of meat could experience life is if the life is constantly reminding itself, I'm not about the meat. But you know what happens when life reminds itself that it's not about the meat? It leaves the meat. The meat returns to meat, and the life returns to life. So how could a soul be in a body? How could life be in the meat? The answer is, it's leaving and returning. Constantly. Ratzei v'shuv. It's a heartbeat. It's a constant breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. It's a constant remembering, I'm not here, but I am here. I'm not here, but I am here. And this is the essence of sleeping. The essence of sleeping is a daily reminder that I'm not who I think I am. The essence of sleeping is a daily reminder that I am more than my physical essence. Just like we spoke about the concept of death being somewhat enriching, recognizing that I'm a soul, not just a body. We have that experience every single night. We have that reminder every morning. Every morning we wake up in the morning and we say, thank you, God, for giving me back a soul. I'm not a body. I'm a soul. And my soul went on high. And I was so much more than the anxieties and the difficulties that I deal with on a daily basis. And I was relieved of that pain and that restraint and those issues. And I'm revisiting my body with a purpose, with a mission to accomplish in this body. But that's not what I'm about. And every night I leave that body and I return to who I am, because I'm bigger and I'm more than my body. Sleep is a gift that God gave us, of remembering, of returning, of the heartbeat, of the breathing in and out, letting go of what I'm busy with, letting go of the details of my life, realizing that it's more than just the details. There's a soul behind it all. Give me 1 second before everyone starts screaming at me. This concept is what humans are about. And I'll explain what I mean. Birds fly in the sky. Animals stand on the ground. Humans have a feet on the ground, but their head in the sky. A human, because we have a brain, is a God-given gift to the world of merging spirituality with physicality. We're a merge of recognizing that I can't escape reality, I can't escape physicality, I can't escape my emotions, and I don't want to. I'm about my emotions, but I could humanize my emotions. I could humanize my pets. I could humanize my home. I could take physical entities and create a table. Humans don't eat like animals. We eat like humans. We humanize our surroundings because we are merging spirituality and physicality. That mergence is a constant battle. It's a constant running back and forth between remembering who I am and remembering what I'm about. This concept is what I'm going to finish off with. Is I think a very unique concept, and the reason why I'm finishing off with this because I think it's a lesson that we can learn in life that we can walk away with, which is all our struggles in life could be helped by realizing that I don't live for myself. I live for a higher purpose. And when we live our life recognizing that at night we go to sleep, which means we're not about the way we perceive our experience. We're not about the physical body that we're restrained to. But in truth, life's about escaping that experience and then returning to it with the message that we got when we escaped. We're not escaping to escape. We're not afraid of the experience. But the experience is not limited to the experience. We're not in a cell. We're not in prison. Imagine being in prison with the keys to the prison cell. You can leave whenever you want. You're not in prison on your restraints, on your challenges. Your challenges are your cell that you were sent to with a mission to elevate. And you know why you're not in jail there? Because you have the keys to the cell. You constantly are leaving to get the info and the data to bring back to help the inhabitants that are in that cell. I hope you enjoyed this class, and I hope I get a lot of emails with questions in the future. And are we going to do this next Sunday? Are we in for next Sunday? God willing?
I think.
Yes.
I
You're not.
remember that, I think when we are in.
Okay. For those that